morning, Ohio State fans. Welcome back to the 11 Dubcast for Wednesday, November 12th. I am joined by our deputy editor, Dan Hope, who just got out of another media scrum for the latest release of the college football playoff rankings. Surprise, surprise, Ohio State is still number one. Thankfully, Indiana is still number two, didn't get jumped by Texas A&M. But Mr. Dan Hope, it was a relatively uneventful evening. I hope you still had a nice one Tuesday night. How are you doing today?
Oh, doing all right. Yeah, not a whole lot to talk about this week with the college football playoff rankings. I would say Ohio State, the clear number one, also number one in my Big Ten power rankings, which will be coming on the site later today. But I think we're going to talk some recruiting today, George, because it's been quite a past week for the Buckeyes on the recruiting trail.
That's right. More than a handful of wins and definitely a bit of a atypical fall in terms of activity in that area relative to normally them getting their work done earlier in the spring on the recruiting or the summer rather on the recruiting trail. But we'll get into all of that activity in a moment. Before we do, we want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor at the 11 Dubcast and 11 Warriors this Ohio State football season. That would be First Bank of Central Ohio. From game day to workday, First Bank of Central Ohio is proud to support the business owners that keep Central Ohio thriving. They are locally owned, business focused, and always in your corner. Give them a visit at fbcentralohio.com. All right, so Dan, to recap the quad feed of recruiting wins, if you will, that Ohio State just had within the last handful of days, all flips. Oops, all flips for Ohio State, which just seems to be the nature of the environment that we're in now, where a commitment doesn't actually mean anything. Everything is a soft verbal. Even a hard verbal is a soft verbal until signing day. And even then, you might have them for a year and then they hit the portal. So there's no such thing as a commitment anymore. But for now, we've got 4 commitments to Ohio State we can hang our hat on. That would be cornerback Jay Timmons, who flipped from Florida State, 3-star offensive lineman Mason Wilhelm, who flipped from North Carolina, 4-star defensive lineman Emmanuel Ruffin, who is from Alabama, was committed to Colorado, decommitted from Colorado, and is now going to Ohio State. I have to give credit to Ramsey, who said you have to refer to him as Ruffin the passer whenever he makes a sack next season or from here on out. And then finally, the one that probably has the most, I would say, prestige attached would be, and not just because of his name, 4-star athlete Legend Bay, who flipped from Tennessee, is regarded as somebody that is very, very fast and I believe is expected to play running back, even though he's regarded as just athlete generally. So that would, always nice to see fast, explosive running backs committing to the Buckeyes. You're never going to turn down more speed in this offense. So, Dan, of those 4 names I just mentioned, who are you most excited about to don the scarlet and gray going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly a reason to be excited about all 4 of these guys. You mentioned Legend Bay. Certainly, anyone who runs a 4.33 40 is going to bring some exciting potential to the offense. And when you can,
I heard he ran a 10-2 100-yard or 100 meter.
Yeah, he
did.
He has run a 10-2. I believe it was wind aided, but still a very fast time for Legend Bay. And, anytime you can get a win over Tennessee, certainly that's exciting for Ohio State. Certainly a big one last December and now getting one on the recruiting trail. Emmanuel Ruffin, a guy, a top 200 prospect, 4th defensive tackle in this class. Defensive line recruiting has been kind of an area of consternation here the last few years. So still some work to do at defensive end, but I think they've built up a really strong defensive tackle class, bringing in Emmanuel Ruffin. Mason Wilhelm, cool story there, the son of the great Matt Wilhelm, former All-American linebacker, huge part of the defense of that 2002 national championship team. Mason Wilhelm, he got an offer from the Buckeyes last Thursday night, committed to Ohio State on Friday morning. So he had been waiting for that offer for a long time, and I think no matter where he had been committed to, he would have flipped as soon as he got that offer from Ohio State. But I think probably the one that stands out the most to me is Jay Timmons, because You probably know his father as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. Lawrence Timmons, who played for the Steelers for 11 years, I believe, was a star at Florida State. You think, oh, this guy, his dad went to Florida State. It's going to be hard to flip him away from the Seminoles. But as soon as Ohio State offered him a couple months ago, he became very interested in Ohio State. Certainly helps that Florida State is in the midst of a terrible season for the second year in a row. But I think that was a big win for Tim Walton and Ohio State in the secondary. I think his composite rank is somewhere around the 150 mark, but I know that some recruiting services have him ranked higher than that. And, that was a position they missed out on. Albert Hill, the top cornerback from the state of Ohio, had one really good cornerback who's been committed to Ohio State for a long time, and Jordan Thomas, but they needed a second premier corner in the class. And I think that's exactly what they're getting in Jay Timmons, a guy who I think has the potential to be one of the better corners in this 2026 class.
All right, cool. Well, yeah, I'll certainly look forward to seeing what all those guys contribute, and hopefully they stick around. But yeah, I never going to turn down. I know we've long established Ohio State is wide receiver U at this point, even though maybe some LSU fans may have an argument about that. That being said, it would be nice to shore up being DBU once again, and hopefully Mr. Timmons can go a long way towards certifying that. There's also going to be some potential flip targets visiting this weekend for the UCLA game, and I know you're very well versed in those. So could you tell us about what maybe we can expect in terms of maybe some more potential wins for Ohio State in November after this weekend?
Yeah, so it's looking like Ohio State's going to have at least 3 official visitors in the 2026 class on campus this weekend. Another corner who's highly regarded, CJ Bronach, he is currently committed to Florida, but Ohio State has been pursuing him heavily since Billy Napier was fired at Florida. I think if they could get him into the class, and there seems to be a lot of mutual interest there, they'd have a really strong trio at that cornerback position. Maybe not somebody who's quite as highly rated as like a Devin Sanchez or even a Jermaine Matthews Jr., but 3 guys who are, solid 4-star, really good prospects who I think would be good reinforcements for Tim Walton's room there at corner. I mentioned defensive end before. They have a defensive end coming in this weekend, Dre Quinn. He was previously committed to Clemson. He's probably the top target on the board at this point for someone they could get on the edge. And, he was interviewed earlier this week, and I thought he had an interesting comment where he still has a couple other visits scheduled after this week, but he mentioned, I could make my decision on signing day. I could make my decision next week. So, that's kind of an interesting comment to hear. You think that, if he's thinking about a possible decision next week with a visit to Ohio State scheduled this weekend, does that mean Ohio State has a chance to win that recruitment this weekend? I know Texas is a big player in that recruitment as well, but that's certainly one that is going to be a big priority for Ohio State because they could really use another edge rusher in this class to pair with Kari Wilder. And then Braxton Rember, a Wake Forest linebacker commit, kind of a more under the radar recruit, but someone who, since they offered him last month, has emerged as a top of a board target for James Laurinaitis as he looks to add a third linebacker to that 2026 class. So I think all 3 of those guys are going to be guys to watch this weekend as potential flips to continue this run for Ohio State. I know there's been some chatter about possibly Alabama defensive line commit J.J. Finch visiting this weekend as well. I'm not sure exactly where that one stands as we speak here, if he's still going to visit, but possibly a 4th official visitor in that class as well.
Well, I don't know what I'm more excited about between those names you just mentioned. Having somebody named Braxton back in an Ohio State uniform or humiliating Clemson on the recruiting trail. Either one of those could be a nice outcome for Buckeye fans. Speaking of Buckeye fans, it's interesting to see what has happened within the last week because there was a lot of, I think, complaining or worry over the summer, given that it wasn't the traditionally strong summer that Ohio State has had in recent seasons relative to recruiting. But again, as I alluded to off the top of the show, the nature of the environment now is there's really no such thing as a firm commitment anymore. Like whether you're a player that's already in college and looking at the transfer portal as an option, if you're not, totally satisfied with your situation, or even if you're in high school still and you say you're committed to a program, and whether something changes with that program or not, you can just say at some point, I'm reopening my recruitment, and then go on a bunch of visits and then potentially flip, as we've seen happen in a lot of cases this week. Now, when you're a program like Ohio State, that puts you in a nice position, because if you're identifying those potential candidates that are reopening their recruitment, and you're a program with a lot of prestige and an opportunity available for someone to come in and fill a need in a recruiting class that maybe didn't have a lot of wins over the summer, there's that opportunity for you. So, given that they didn't have as strong as they have had traditionally a summer this past summer, and then it would stand to reason that with the resources and opportunities available, they would have this kind of fall that they've just had within the last week, and potentially even more lucrative going into the next handful of weeks as they have more recruits visiting. Do you think it's probably best that we just generally exercise caution as fans going forward when they don't, if they have another summer like the one that they had last summer, where there aren't as many wins as we would expect? Should the expectation kind of be going forward that there's going to be more filling in the gaps, like what we're seeing right now with so many flips coming to Columbus?
Well, I've learned from covering Ohio State for 9 years and watching the way these things play out is recruiting is always cyclical. Like it seems like every year, regardless of time periods, there's always a couple times during the year where Ohio State goes on a big run and gets a bunch of commitments in a row and everybody's excited. And there's always a time or two during the year where Ohio State goes months without a commitment and everybody's like, what's going on? So I think that's just the nature of the beast in recruiting. But to your point, you really, especially nowadays, you really cannot evaluate a recruiting class until signing day, until guys sign their name on the dotted line. And I think what we are seeing somewhat this year is, I think, a couple things. I think in regards to the summer, I think Ohio State, Ryan Day has made it clear he doesn't want recruits who are all about the money and nothing else. And so Ohio State and some of those bidding wars that are just coming down to who makes the biggest offer, Ohio State wasn't winning those wars because they are not as willing as some other schools to just promise guys a bunch of upfront money just to win those battles. And so, that hurt Ohio State during the summer in terms of some of their top targets, guys like Felix Ojo and Luke Wafel and Carter Meadows. But I think what we're seeing this fall, I think something that's really helped Ohio State this fall is the fact that while Ohio State is rolling right now, again, number one team in the country, defending national champions, tons of stability. There's a ton of programs around college football right now that don't have stability. We've talked about the coach firings and, a lot of these big name programs not having good seasons. And I think Ohio State's done a great job of recognizing those flip opportunities around the country and staying aggressive. You know, I think Ohio State recognized it, like, yeah, maybe they didn't get quite as many commitments as they wanted in June and July, but signing day is not till December. So you stay on guys and you look around the country and say, okay, Florida State's struggling. Maybe we can get one of their guys. North Carolina's not doing what we thought they were going to do. Colorado is having a bad season. You again, Clemson, you mentioned Clemson, they're having a season that's not been anywhere close to what it was supposed to be. And so I think the stability that Ohio State has right now is pretty much unmatched. I think you can objectively say no program right now is in a better position than Ohio State based on what they accomplished last year, what they've done so far this year. And I think you're maybe seeing too is some of these guys who maybe initially made their decision just based on this team's offering the most money. Maybe they're taking a second look now at Ohio State because maybe that team they committed to in the first place isn't doing what they thought they were going to do. And Ohio State's interested in them. And you go, this team hasn't lost a game since last year's college football playoff. They're the defending national champions. They had 14 NFL draft picks last year, and they might be even better this year. So there's a lot of reasons that if you're a recruit, you see what Ohio State's doing and you can go, if I want to have a chance to go compete for a national championship and to go play in the NFL, there's not many better places for me to go than Ohio State. And so I think Ohio State, by staying patient and recognizing flip opportunities, has maybe been able to overcome some of its hesitancy to throw out tons of upfront NIL money and get guys later in the cycle who really want to be Buckeyes.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the right approach to go about doing it. Something that has always stood out to me just in the current environment we're in was when I dug up that I don't want to say I dug it up, but it was interesting that it got quickly deleted from the internet after it posted that podcast that Carson Hinsman did right before they played Missouri in the Cotton Bowl a few years ago. And I thought one of the more understated things that he said on that podcast was that Ohio State just generally doesn't pay offensive linemen when they're coming in the door relative to a lot of these other programs like Miami that'll look at somebody coming in from high school and say, yeah, we'll give you $1 million. Sure, that's fine. So we're still in the Wild West in terms of like where a lot of this gets sorted out and what the valuation for a lot of these players at different positions should be. But I think the general approach of, not really throwing a lot of money at guys that haven't necessarily proven it yet and wanting players that are going to come in and value the opportunity to compete and think long term that this is a program that, regardless of where you are playing, is consistently putting guys at every position into the NFL. And that if you come in, you just put the work in, you're going to put yourself in the best position to play professionally one day if you've got the talent for it. I think that that's about as good of a selling offer as you can have for any young person coming in that wants to be a great football player. So it's nice to have that stability. It's just another way where we're spoiled as Ohio State fans, where we get to enjoy it season after season. So I look forward to seeing maybe a few more flips, as you mentioned, based on the people that are going to be visiting for the upcoming game this weekend against UCLA. We'll be sure to preview that game on the Friday morning edition of the show. And our Dan is not going to be with us for another preview this week, but we will have Ramsey back for an encore preview. So I'm sure everybody will be looking forward to that. But until then, Dan, thank you very much for joining us tonight, or today rather. And thank you for tuning into the 11 Dubcast. Thank you to our sponsor, First Bank of Central Ohio. And we will be back for the Thursday episode tomorrow with Andy Anders. So make sure you tune in, and we'll see you then. Take care, folks.